Welcome, everyone. So glad to have you on our webinar this evening. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you join us for this exciting conversation around raising generous children. On behalf of the Woodbury Community Foundation, our mission is to connect people and organizations to causes that matter. And we really have this vision to foster a more generous and philanthropic community. And we know how important it is to instill these priorities in the next generation. So we're looking forward to today's discussion to help better equip families to improve how we do this. We have a variety of folks attending our webinar today. Some are parents and grandparents. Others may be leaders in the community, leaders of nonprofits or business professionals. So we want you to know that we're going to be talking about raising generous kids from the parent perspective for the ease of our conversation today. After sitting through this panel earlier today, learning from the folks that you're going to learn from today, I can guarantee you that regardless of your role or the way that you're interpreting the session, you're going to find something of value to bring to your life and to your job. So thank you. And again, so I can introduce myself first, a little about me. My name again is Christy Boysen. Woodbury Community Foundation is basically an entirely volunteer-run organization. And so I have the privilege of serving as the vice chair on the board. I do a lot of the work around fundraising in our community for the foundation and also around our racial equity programs that we run at the foundation. I have lived in Woodbury for 11 years. I own a small business, a marketing business in town. I'm married to my husband, Gerald, and we have 2 middle school boys. And so we are really in the thick of these conversations in my home. I am very pleased to introduce our co-host tonight and our moderator, Christy Boysen with Apex Legacy Consultants.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is an absolute privilege to be here with Christy and the rest of the panelists to talk with you about generosity. So thanks for joining us. A little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in Hudson, lived across the country, and eventually settled in Woodbury, actually, and eventually migrated just a little bit north. But I've spent the majority of my career in nonprofit work, and as of late, helping families and nonprofits think about the most efficient and strategic ways to give. And often that starts with things like tonight, thinking about generosity, integrating it into our lives, learning from others. And so it's a joy to be here, Christy. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Before I introduce our panel, I just want to give a special thank you to our sponsor for tonight, Spire Credit Union of Woodbury. We really appreciate their support of our community efforts. And so just a special thank you to Spire. So in addition to Christy's expertise with Apex Legacy Consultants that she'll be sharing with us tonight, we have invited different panelists who can help offer different perspectives on our topic of raising generous kids for tonight. So I want to introduce our panel. MiaLisa Millares is the Executive Director of Doing Good Together, which is a Minnesota-based national nonprofit that incorporates volunteering and kindness and makes it easy for every family. She has a decade of experience in nonprofit work and has worked with families, youth, and children throughout her career. We are also thankful and honored to have Julie Neilsen on our panel tonight. Julie Neilsen is the superintendent of South Washington County School District, where she shapes school policy and works closely with the school board to empower students to learn and to equip educators to foster kindness in the classroom. South Washington County Schools is one of our school districts represented in our community. So thank you, Julie, for being here. Beth Cummings is a community activist and co-founder of an organization called Minnesota Kids Give, which is a nonprofit dedicated to helping young people gain an understanding of financial philanthropy. They offer educational programming and exposure to local nonprofits, plus the opportunity for students to make a financial gift to the organization that they've been exposed to. And our fifth panelist for tonight is Philip Eviston. Philip is a senior at Stillwater High School, one of the other school districts represented in our community. And he's also a director with the foundation. I have the privilege of serving with him. He was part of a student-led initiative to create QR code accessible mental health resources for students and help remove that awkwardness and barriers around getting help. He volunteers regularly and will bring a great perspective on the practical experiences and conversations that have helped him gain a desire to give back at such a young age. So thank you for all of you for being here tonight. We're excited to learn from you. And now I'm going to hand it back to two Christys tonight, who will guide us through the rest of our discussion for today.
Thanks so much, Christy. All right, so panelists, we have some great questions in store for you, but I wanted to just take a minute to kind of pause and start with a really basic question around generosity. What does it mean to you, and why did you want to be a part of the conversation tonight? Julie, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christy. When I think about generosity, I think about a level of energy. It's a vibe, it's an action, it's a feeling, it's a practice. And so I think that in leading a school district of almost 20,000 students, really there's nothing more important than making sure that we create generous, kind students. And so I've already learned things as a member of this panel from the others. And I think what I know about generosity, what I know about being good humans, is that it builds stronger relationships. It makes for happier and healthier individuals. And all of those things are important to who we are as individual members as well as community members. So thank you so much. I'm excited. I think there's nothing more important than the gratitude and the generosity spirit that we can instill in kids.
Wonderful. Mia, would you like to share next? Maya, my goodness, my apologies.
No worries at all. Yeah, absolutely. So I think about generosity as kind of a mindset of kindness that we need to put into action. So the idea that we all have an abundance of something, right? And it might be time, it might be talents, it might be finances, but figuring out where you are in your life, finding that what's right for you in the season that you're in right now, and then putting that into action. And so I think about our organization as one that tries to inspire families and parents to be able to go out and do good in the world and to kind of put that mindset into action. And so that's part of why I really wanted to be part of this conversation today. So I'm really excited to be here too and to learn from others as well.
Thank you. Philip, how about you?
Yeah, generosity to me, I feel really changes per person and kind of where your values lie. For me as a high schooler right now, it's really about my local community and making an impact. Whereas for maybe you, Christy, could be maybe about like your clients and family planning and all of that. So generosity, I feel, is very widespread, but it's always for the greater good and giving back and doing what you can to better the individuals around you.
Thank you. And Beth, last but not least.
Thank you. I think of generosity simply off the top of my head was giving. It's giving what you can, so that your time or money, or giving what you have, or really giving an ear to listen to. I mean, it's another component. Kindness and empathy and generosity is all tied in together. And I wanted to be very much part of this conversation because with my involvement in our nonprofit, Minnesota Kids Give, generosity is a large component of the conversation that we have. And again, it's generosity also, it's wonderful. There's wonderful evidence that generosity is a component of happiness. So, and there's evidence, research evidence that generosity, you're inherently born with a generous soul, a generous being. And so I think if we can help children tap into that and facilitate it, they'll hopefully use those faculties to live fulfilled, happy lives.
Thank you. All right, next question. So given your work, Maya, at Doing Good Together, I imagine that you have a lot of conversations about generosity with families. What barriers or challenges get in the way of families integrating generosity into their families?
Good question, Christy. So I think that one of the things that I hear from families a lot is, I feel overwhelmed. Does that like resonate with anyone at all ever? I mean, as a parent, right? We're working, we're taking care of meals, we're doing laundry, we're trying to get our kids to whatever events that they need to be at and make sure they're prepared. And it just feels like there's block after block after block after block, and this tower is growing taller and taller by the second, right? Like, so overwhelmed as a parent, I think is something that people feel. And I can resonate with that too. I've got 3 kiddos. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it's a lot, right? Every day. And so that's the challenge that I hear probably most often. How am I going to fit this into my already busy schedule? I'm overwhelmed with life. And I think one of the things that I talk to families about on a regular basis is that you don't have to start huge, right? You can start really small. You can just do something for today, right? And so I think that by having that conversation with families, it helps to get them on the right page of being like, yes, this is something I can do. This is something I can tackle. It is important. You know, when I look at research tells us that parents value the idea of kids being caring and kids giving back as one of the number one values for kids that they want, right? They want kids who are going to give back to the community, who are going to care. But when we look at kids, there's some research out there that shows that kiddos believe that parents value academics as number one. And not that academics are bad, academics are great, right? But there's a disconnect there, right? In what parents are hoping for kids and what kids believe parents are hoping for them, right? And so with this disconnect that we have, we need to figure out why. Why is there this gap? Why is there this disconnect? And so I think it may go back to this question, right? We feel so overwhelmed. We feel so challenged by all that's thrown at us in life. And I think we need to articulate to our kids, to our families, how important these things are. And that can be just shifting the conversation. That can be just simply asking a different question when kids get home from school, asking them, who did you help today? Just by shifting that one thing, you can kind of turn the conversation from one thing to another. Who did you help? How did you help others? What was something generous that you saw happen today? So just by shifting that little tiny thing, it doesn't have to be a big, overwhelming thing for families. It can be a small little detail. It can be a question. It can be as simple as taking a breath at dinner time and just having a little bit of space. It can be incorporating a little kind practice into your daily life. And so for me, I think that barrier, that challenge, to get back to your question, Christy, is that I think parents feel overwhelmed and they think, how can I possibly incorporate another thing into my already busy schedule? And I think the answer is, if we want what we're articulating that we want as parents, which is kind, generous kids, then we have to. And then it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be that overwhelming thing that we're thinking. It can be something really simple. And we start small and then grow, because kindness is something that, if practiced, it's a muscle that kind of grows and gets strengthened.
And Maya, I would say that I think we can have both, the importance of academics, the importance of kindness. I think the two can be integrated. In writing, we sometimes call stories that kids are writing their personal narratives. And sometimes students don't have a lot to write about if they didn't go on a trip, if they didn't break a leg, if they, something big. But what about the toothpaste that fell off the toothbrush that morning? What about the shoelace that came untied? And so how can we look at giving and generosity in what we call small moments? A note, a small treat, a high five, a hug, a word. And I think integrating in with our students in just the smallest of ways, that spirit of generosity. And so I think that if done well, we could still have that focus on academics and be equally as strong in that social, emotional, and kindness and generosity.
Oh, Julie, I 100% agree with you. I think they go hand in hand. I think the key is that we have to keep parents understanding how important it is that they need to be equal partners in moving forward in the world. And I think when we do that, we build the kind of kids that we're hoping for, right? We build the smart kids who are looking to all of those social injustices to try to help move the world forward. And we build kiddos that are willing to give back with the ways that they're able to in their abundances.
Excellent. All right. So as we were preparing for this, we had the chance to, Christy and I had the chance to sit down with all of you and kind of get to know you a little bit and hear a bit about your passion for this. And a few of you mentioned that creating space for conversations or creating kind of opportunities for exposure to differences was a really important part of understanding generosity. Kids need to learn that there is need in the world, or they don't really understand the value of giving to others. And so how do you help kids understand, or how do you expose them appropriately to needs and privilege? And I'd love to start with you, Beth, if that's all right.
Sure. It's kind of a big, heady thing to think about. But I think if you can start with maybe needs first, you can, with little kids. I have a 7 and 5-year-old. So just thinking of, I remember my daughter in kindergarten, she came home with a sheet that was needs and wants. And so just starting with that exercise, or it could happen organically of something that's noted out in the community, or something like, if there's a homeless person standing at the side of the road at the stoplight, and kind of, I remember my daughter asking for the first time, why are they there? And to have a honest, age appropriate conversation about that, and really just tell the truth. They don't have a home, and a need is a roof over your head. And unfortunately, they don't have that, but we have that, and we are very fortunate to have that. And so then having, I guess, maybe like a top-down approach about thinking about then privilege and what you help a child think about what they have, and that what others might not have. But then there's a component in that of also, you don't have to feel guilty for having that. You should be grateful for having that. And then gratitude is a component then in there. And then hopefully there comes generosity from that gratitude. So that's my kind of thought about needs and privilege. And again, I don't think you need to be feel guilty about privilege. It's just what you can do with it.
Thanks, Beth. Does anyone else want to add thoughts on this topic? Things you've experienced in work or with your own families?
I think one of the best ways with younger students, and even students into middle school and high school, is through the use of picture books. I think sometimes picture books develop an empathy and a connection to characters, and therefore you're able to have deeper conversations. You might be reading a novel, and I think to incorporate in through natural reading and natural experiences, the need versus a privilege or a want. And really, I think, as Beth said, actually listing what are needs, what are privileges. And I think for students to sometimes see that list of how really short that needs list can be, and those other things that really are a privilege, and then how do we use those privileges perhaps to help others?
Great, thanks. Philip, I'd love to hear from you, right? So as we shared or heard your bio and kind of your background, and of course you're living in the world of being a student, how did your parents engage with you in conversations around need and privilege?
Yeah, so really early on, my family's always really valued giving back to the community and helping people in need. So I can recall back to either volunteering at a local church that we attend, or going to like a food drive, a clothes drive, being there in person to recognize the importance of like giving back to people in need. and recognizing how you're different and how you're privileged and how you can give what you have because you don't need all of it. Kind of back to that want and need list. It is really short. So having those experiences really early on to then move forward in my life and build on that to better understand it with new experiences has helped me a lot with understanding my privilege and where I stand in the greater society, really.
Awesome. Thanks. So kind of emerging these last two questions around the challenges and barriers, and of course, this idea of integrating conversations around needs and privileges into daily life. What are kind of consistent or creative ways with low effort, but kind of high value or high reward? What are creative ways that you can incorporate generosity into everyday life? And Maya, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Sure. So as I'm listening to the conversation, I'm thinking about this activity that we have on our website and this curriculum that we have, thinking about ourselves and trying to draw us into a bigger circle. So we have this circles of concern kind of activity where you're thinking about yourself and what are my needs, right? And you've talked a little bit about needs and privileges already, but what are my needs? And then kind of moving that outside to your family, right? So it's easiest to kind of next go to that next level of family, which for little kids is a great way to think about it with even with chores. How can I be generous in helping my family? How can I give back in little ways, right? My 3-year-old can't do everything, but she can help me fold towels. She can, draw and color, and she produces a lot of beautiful artwork, I must say, but I can't keep all of it. So can I give that to a nursing home, right? Can I be able to share her generosity in small ways, right? So kind of thinking to that next circle of your family, how can you give to your family and connect there? And then taking it to the next level, how can you give to your neighborhood? What does it look like to step outside that bubble of your family and to think about people outside of yourself in that neighborhood kind of zone? What can I do? Can I pick up litter outside as I walk to the store? Easy, right? I'm walking to the store anyway. And it's a way to give back and help our earth and be able to feel like you're part of a community and connected. And then thinking on the next level, right, to your nation, right? How can I go ahead and, connect with people that have maybe served our country or other people who've been helping our nation in some way? Advocate for something that's important to you. And then, of course, for our world. So I think thinking about those in different levels as a parent is really helpful. And I think simple things, right? As I was saying before, it does not have to be difficult to start. The breath at dinner, the chores for your kiddos. We have at our house a magic mail station where we have some markers and some colored pencils and some crayons, and the kids will draw pictures on a regular basis. And I have labels all printed out so that we can simply mail them off to our favorite nursing home or send them over to Color a Smile, send them to Operation Gratitude. They're very simple ways to just kind of incorporate what you're already doing. And that builds a love, I think, for gratitude and for giving back. And once you have that love, kids are hungry for more, right? And with their academics, they're going to tie that in and figure out what are they most passionate about so that they're able to kind of pull it further and take it further.
Beautiful. Beth, you shared something interesting about groceries and grocery shopping when we talked. I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
Oh, right. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, and especially around the holidays, if we make a point to go family grocery shopping, and the kids will decide what kind of non-perishable goods will go specifically to, say the neighborhood house. And so we have a neighborhood house bag in our pantry. And so when we come home from the grocery store, it's been picked up by my children and then they put it in the bag. And then if you can have time as a family to then drop it off to your chosen food shelf or, homeless shelter, wherever, but to kind of do that full circle is really, I think, meaningful. So that's just something, small that you could do, just kind of, think about it, grocery shopping, making it a little bit more, meaningful. And then other things I was thinking about, gratitude, having sometimes at our table, we have like a gratitude roundtable. So it's, what are you grateful for? And then we also discuss sometimes who did you help today and who helped you, is a nice kind of practice. Other things that I'm part of a parent group. It's called Parent Circle, and we meet in St. Paul. It's kind of like an ECFE. And around last Christmas, we made homeless love bags. So we brought our kids to our Parent Circle, and we did basically assembly line, and we filled a gallon Ziploc bag with, so it was winter time. So we did a couple things of hot hands, hand sanitizer, masks, snacks, and then you just keep them in your car. And then if you do pull up to a stoplight and you do have time, you just offer it. So just little things that I kind of picked up along the way. And then another one with my husband being the financial advisor, but a big thing, it's not, he didn't come up with it. It's, having kids when they're a little older, if they get money from a birthday or from chores, it's the 3 jars of spend, save, give, and they empowering your children to make the decision, one, I guess, about how much money they want to go into each, but then that give jar where they choose to donate that to. So I think that that's really a wonderful concept. And then lastly, there's again with this parent circle that I'm also involved in, we did we had a session on values, and it really, I think, is impactful to think, and if you have time to sit down with your family and go over, what do we value? What are our values? And I can share a little later, but there's all sorts of websites that can kind of help you navigate, because to me that can be also intimidating, because you have to put some time and thought into that specifically, but from that you can also decide where you choose to give, where you want to spend your time, and then it will narrow down your giving and generosity.
That's great. Julie?
Beth, probably one of the best examples I just heard you talk about was the generosity of time and appreciation. And I shared with the panel before we came on that last week at our high schools, we recognized and appreciated our veterans. And, we hosted a reception where there was coffee and just simple donuts, but they were so incredibly grateful by the generosity of our ROTC program. In addition, I think it's really great for our kids to see veterans who have fought in multiple wars and to get teary-eyed as our kids clapped for 7 minutes. And that is a spirit of generosity. That's an action. It doesn't cost any money to show respect and to be respectful. And I think in that moment, our kids could sense what that meant to them as they walked in, having tears rolling down their cheeks, just how appreciative they were of the generosity of our students.
Thanks. One of the things I'm just thinking about, my upbringing, and my parents were really intentional about kind of carving out specific ways that we could give back within our community. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting that they did, and this I remember as we got older, I don't know if it was as big a part of our family when we were younger, was anytime we went on a family trip somewhere, there was always a component of giving back. A lot of the trip was about experiences and new things, and visiting a new culture or hiking mountains or doing whatever crazy adventures my dad in particular wanted us to go on. But there was often this additional component of, but also, how do we give back? How do we invest in the community? Is there a way for us to learn or be exposed to something different? So that our eyes could be opened, and then really intentional conversations after those experiences around, what does generosity mean? What does this look like in our day-to-day life? And so as I think about older children, I think the conversation can go a little bit deeper. And a lot of, something I hear a lot in my work is it too late for me to start having conversations about generosity? My kids are in high school, or I can't tell you how many families I've sat with who are teary-eyed saying, my kids, I tried to talk about generosity with my 30-something-year-old children, and they wanted to keep the money themselves. They didn't want to give it away, and they think they've messed something up. So I'm curious, just taking this kind of conversation a little bit further, when you think about older children, high schoolers, college age, or older than that, it's never too late to integrate generosity into what it is that you're doing. Any ideas for how, any parents that are on this call who have older kids, thoughts about how they can interact or engage in generosity with those? And Philip, maybe this is a space for you to chime in too.
Yeah, I can speak as an older child, 17. Yeah, I think it was either last Christmas or the Christmas prior. My family decided to do a little turn, and instead of having it all just be about us, it was going to be about giving money back out. So we all got $50 and picked an organization to give back to really think about not us, but someone else instead. I remember I did 4Ocean, so climate's important to me. So giving back to a organization that values climate safety, climate quality, climate change. So, I mean, small things like that, and then taking the time to think about that, going through that process of thinking, where do I want to go? What do I recognize in this organization that like resonates with me, which makes it more impactful in a way? So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't have to be big things, kind of what was echoed earlier. It can be small things like that.
Thanks.
I'd love to add something to that if it's okay. I think with older kids, I think one of the big keys is to harness just their love and their passion for whatever it is. And so I think just as a parent, and this works with little kids too, because we all want to help what we're really passionate about, right? And so my 3-year-old and my 7-year-old and 10-year-old will tell me kind of what's really important to them. And I think if you can harness that, and Beth kind of talked a little bit about this with kind of a giving box and kind of letting them speak to where they want to donate that, but having dinner conversations around what's important to them and letting them choose, I think is huge. I also think leveraging their relationships with friends is really helpful too, because teenagers and tweens, friends are really important to them. And so having them bring friends along on your trip to do a service project or on your grocery run to get the extra food at the food shelf to donate, I think not only helps your kids and lets them kind of drive where their passions are, but also inspires their friends as well. And I'd say lastly, kind of jumping in and letting the kids inspire those around them too, because if you can inspire them to go into their school and they find out that the food shelf needs, the food shelf has hot dogs, but they need ketchup and mustard, right? Or whatever it is. And they go in and they tell the people at the food shelf, or they tell their friends at the in their class, hey, we need to raise some ketchup and some mustard and get it all together and bring it down to the food shelf. We can do this. If they become leaders in that, you're really building that spirit of generosity that just kind of spreads like wildfire in a school. And I think that really is inspirational to young people.
Thank you. So when Christy mentioned that she was inviting Julie, I got really excited to hear a bit of her thoughts on, the classroom. So our children spend so much time each day with educators. And so I would love, Julie, for you to share about how you're integrating generosity into the leadership development of the teachers in the district, and anything practical that you're seeing as they take that learning and implement it within the classroom.
Absolutely. Certainly something. I am no longer in the classroom, but I have great memories and I go back into the schools, and I certainly love kids, but my job now is to develop leaders. And so when I think about that generosity, it's typically this time of year where we have about 120 system leaders. And we know that over our winter break, we have kids that don't have meals. And so we ask our leaders to give generously of very specific items like juice boxes, peanut butter, just specific items. And it was amazing how much we gathered by this group of 120 individuals. And so one thing I'd like the group to know is that when we talk about generosity, it is a practice. And I shared earlier with the group that there was a time with our leaders that they were each to write a note of gratitude to someone. And as I observed around the room, everyone's behavior was much different. Some got started right away. Some didn't even pick up their pencil. Some looked like, oh my gosh, she's really going to make us write a note to somebody. And so I think it's that reminder for all of us that generosity too is a comfort. And so in order to get better at it, we have to keep practicing it. And we really put that on ourselves. As district leaders this year, we are doing a book study with Onward. The book is Onward. It's by Elena Aguilar, talking about various character traits. And as leaders, we model those things with each other. This month, it's about self-care. So in order to help other people, taking care of yourself. So we model those activities with us as leaders. We practice those things. And then we ask that our leaders take back those things back to their teachers. And then the teachers, of course, take it back to the classrooms. And so much of what we do at the district level or the system level then is integrated into our classrooms and through our teachers. We do things like morning meetings where students have a voice. There are a lot of read aloud opportunities. As I shared, there are always activities for students to practice their manners and respect. And so many of those things are expected across our whole system, but we start with the modeling at the top by our highest leaders, and then we take that right down into the classrooms, right to the students.
Awesome, thanks. Maya and Beth and Christy, chime in if you'd like. You have students that are in school. Are there things that you've seen take place within the school that your kids have brought home that you thought was just really interesting, or that you wanted to then continue integrating into your families? And this is an off-the-cuff question, so feel free to say no thanks and we'll move on. All right, we're going to move on. We'll Maya. Yes.
No, that's okay. Yeah, one of the activities they did at one of my kids' schools was that they had a holiday kind of, it was an assembly line that they kind of assembled these amazing little bags for individuals, and it was so well orchestrated, and just it was something that I said, gosh, we're going to do this every single year. And it was an optional sort of activity, but it was just beautifully done. The community donated all of the supplies, and it was all just set out. And it was nice that we could participate as a family. And so that, coupled with the conversation, was something that, I just wanted to make sure that it was kind of an annual sort of opportunity for my kiddos.
Yeah.
And at my daughter's elementary school, there's a parent-led kindness committee. So I think there's a kindness week or something, I forget which month, but we try to integrate it throughout the school year. So that keeps it at the forefront. It's important.
That's great. I remember I had a teacher in high school who talked about generosity as something we could do with our words. And so the encouragement was, or this is what I took away, and it's something that's impacted my life since, is, when we see something in someone else that we admire, that we love, whether it's, hey, I really like your shirt, or I saw what you did, I saw that was kind, or hey, friend, just using everyday moments to encourage those around us, and that is generosity too. It doesn't have to be giving of money, and that's not even really giving of time. It's just slowing down enough to notice those around us, and then choosing to speak truth, speak kindness into those around us. And that can often change the course of someone's day. You hear those stories of people who are having a really, really hard time, and someone spoke into their life, and that shifted what was going on for them. And that's generosity too. So that's something that I think really stood out to me as a high school student. So age appropriate conversations, we touched on this just a little bit over the last couple questions, but we often talk with our young kids differently than we do our older children. And so what do conversations around generosity look like for kids of different ages, right? So from preschool all the way through young adulthood, how do you have conversations, or what are conversation starters that you've seen success with, or your kids engage with? And Beth, maybe we'll start with you.
As I'm thinking about this, the only thing I think it started in ECFE was when we were talking about, just in general, when topics like this come up, hard topics or good topics, anything, it's just to be honest at the level that your child can understand. So I just think honesty, generosity, I mean, we're using all these words now, intermingled, kindness, empathy, all of it is wonderful. So I think can't really think of like a noted thing that I've used, but again, it could just be something that happens in the in the car ride to school. It doesn't have to be at the dinner table. You don't have to have it all the time. I really like how Julie keeps saying that generosity also is a practice. Mm-hmm. I think that is a really great way to put it. If you can just kind of keep it there, you can easily have the conversations that just usually pop up then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Philip, I'd love to hear from you on this one specifically. So, how have you, over the course of your life, how have your parents engaged with you in conversations, or maybe this is something you're doing with your friends? You're actively engaging in generosity yourself. How do you talk about it?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not like the normal generous person. I can tie this kind of into what I do at school in my school community. I feel like that's where I'm most prominent when it comes to giving back. Mm-hmm. So there's a few organizations I'm a part of that solely focuses on like the basis of giving back and generosity as a whole. And one big thing I've done is a winter gear drive that was school wide. So engaging my peers to like get behind this thing that normally isn't running through a high schooler's mind by having it be in every first hour classroom. And I remember that week I was walking around with a sign in the hallways reminding people, tomorrow bring in your winter gear that you don't need, so that I could go to someone in need, and engaging my age group in generosity, in a way that is relevant to us. So yeah.
I remember you mentioning, and Christy shared this with me during your initial talk about the bank account that your parents set up for you. Do you want to talk a little bit about that too?
Totally. Yeah. So my parents really value kind of the way they've been raising me, is kind of letting me take initiative of it and let me kind of move forward with it without them like hounding over me. So with the bank account, right when I could open it, they brought me there, had me stand in front of the teller and do the whole thing. It was really daunting at the time, being like barely a teenager and getting a debit card and going through that process. But with starting so early, really quickly understanding the importance of money. And you can tie that back into giving back. I mean, wherever you are, recognize some of the money that you have, how you can give that back. Because now you've grown and that's a part of, it always will be financial responsibility. Additionally, I mean, my parents had me get a job when I could. So at 15, I started working along with everything else because they value the importance of that and what it's like to be part of the system where you're working with people, giving back. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Any additional thoughts that anyone has on age-appropriate conversations, Maya?
Yeah, I think that, and this has been alluded to before here too, but I think reading books with kids is so important. And then I think the follow-up conversation can be, just some very basic questions about the book, but books build that empathy that help kids to be able to put themselves in someone else's shoes and think about a situation differently. And so I think through that exercise of reading picture books with kids, and it's amazing. Picture books have these amazing kind of morals and stories that even adults can reflect on and get something out of. And so I'm a big fan of intergenerational conversations. So yes, there are age appropriate, questions and things like that, but I actually really love intergenerational conversations because it allows little kids to hear the big kid answers, and all of a sudden the answers that you get from the younger kids are really quite amazing. And I'm surprised because I have that third kid who's 3 and a 10-year-old, and there's kind of a big age gap. When we have these conversations, my little one will come out with amazing answers that I probably wouldn't have had, with a 3-year-old to begin with. And so I think just by that modeling and by the building of empathy through reading, I think that's really important. And I'd also say, after doing a service project, the reflection is just as valuable as the service itself, because it takes that learning further. It allows you to really process what happened. Small story, I promise it's small, but I was at a family service fair. Our organization does these fairs where families come and practice doing service at different locations. And this little boy came up to me after he was doing some painted rocks, right? And he was painting them for people who needed some comfort, right? And so those rocks get passed on. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Do you know Pokemon?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I have a 7-year-old." So yes, I do. And I named some Pokemon. And he said, "Well, I just want to tell you that this fair is kind of like Pokemon." And I said, can you tell me more about that? Because I wasn't making the connection. And he said, "Well, the Pokemon, they evolve. If you didn't know, Pokemon evolves as they apparently, I don't fully understand, but they evolve." And he said, "In this fair, I feel like I've evolved too, because I was able to do these different projects and I just feel different. And I feel like maybe I'll never be the same again because I understand more now about what people are going through." And I just wish I had it on tape because it was so cute. And it's like, yes, that's why we have the conversations. That's why we ask questions. That's why we read books. That's why we do this, because it builds that understanding and generous spirit in kiddos.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. That was a great story. All right. So Beth, your organization specifically empowers kids in the classroom to select a charity that's most important to them, which is a huge part of giving them a voice into giving. Why is it important to give them that ability as you've been teaching and coaching them?
Well, in our curriculum, first, it's just introducing what is philanthropy, time, talent, treasure. But a big component of that then is kind of, they're like, okay, time, talent, treasure, but where do we give it to? So providing them with examples of different nonprofits. And again, going back to kind of what I was talking about with the value sheet, if you could help the child understand what they value, and then they can narrow down their interests and kind of think about like, well, there was most recently a student in our class, and her mother was going to give birth to the 4th kid. And she was very excited. And she said, well, my mom's going to give birth at United Hospital in St. Paul. And so we helped facilitate kind of understanding a little bit more that United Hospital is a nonprofit. You can give to the Mother Baby Center specifically if you would like. So we kind of provided her with that research. So different things like that. Or if a child doesn't, they say, I don't know, then we also, there's a wonderful, wonderful organizations out there that we could, and local organizations specifically, that we can we start there too. We start local. And just, then they get to choose what sounds good to them. There's other nonprofit partners that we've had, something called the Gunner Project. We have a friend who started this nonprofit, and it's about, he teaches basically emotional wellness and being present, and how that all ties into happiness. And what they do is they, part of their organization is they build they make it's called a happiness tracker bracelet. And so it's a bracelet with beads, and there's a bead that moves. And so you can move the bead around the bracelet. If you think about, you're in the moment or something makes you happy, you move that tracker bead. And that really resonated with another child. So just kind of giving them the knowledge and then seeing where they want to go with it is, I think, just really valuable and impactful for them. And then the other piece too is there's a lot of child-led nonprofits out there as well. So that is also empowering to see that a kid can, do a towel drive, towels for teens, or there was something called PABS Packs, and they, this organization made backpacks for kids in Children's Hospital. So they had something to do, and if they didn't have a lot in the hospital room. So just lovely things. But again, also telling them, you don't have to start the organization, you can also contribute. So it's just we all do better when we all do better. Thank you, Paul Wellstone. So yeah.
Thanks, Beth. One of the things that a lot of families that I work with choose to do, but some were already doing it, is utilizing donor advised funds, which is essentially a charitable checkbook, but teaching their kids how to give and how to have a voice in where funds go. So, and you don't need a donor advised fund to do this. It could be a kind of like you mentioned, Philip, giving your children, $50, or letting them create a proposal for organizations that funds can go to. I know one family does this every year for Christmas. They have $500 that the family gets to choose where it goes. And they have kids ranging from 5 all the way into college. And so each of the kids puts together, they research and they dream up the organization that they think should, receive these funds. And then they get to share this with their family over dinner, why they're advocating for these different nonprofits. And then collectively, the family decides where those funds should go. And so it's a way for the kids to engage in giving. It's really practical. It brings the family together. It's just a really creative way of giving everyone a voice at the table. And then oftentimes I've learned this in the nonprofit realm, when a child writes a letter and says, we picked you, here's why, we love you, that one makes anyone at that organization's heart in their day. But also they often get a response back, and that continues to perpetuate this value of giving. And so creating space to give your kids a voice in where and how giving looks is beautiful, and can really transform their experience day to day. I recognize we're getting a little bit low on time here, and so I'm going to just kind of skim through a couple things. So one of the things we'll be following up with you on is sending an email with just practical tools, practical resources, and literature that's out there to help you as you're trying to engage your kids in conversations around generosity. So look for that in your inbox. I want to create just a little space here at the tail end. Christy, do you want to share a bit about just upcoming opportunities, things that you could practically do right in the community when it comes to generosity?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, one of the great things about a community foundation is that our whole role is to connect you to causes and have things that go on in the community. And you don't have to start out your own nonprofit. You can do things through the foundation, which is really fun. Tomorrow night, actually, we have a great opportunity for families. Bridgman's Ice Cream in Woodbury is doing a fundraiser for the foundation. So it is a great way to bring and I think kids of all age love ice cream. I know I do. But to go from 5 to 9 over there. And I think it's also a perfect way to, have some ice cream and even start initiating this conversation. You could maybe talk about your end of the year giving, or you could talk about what you want to do for the holidays over that night. We are also in the middle of a winter clothing drive that is in partnership with the school district's foundation, so Washco Cares. And so we've got boxes that will be set up around the community. We're collecting primarily, we would love brand new snow pants or waterproof gloves. And so those boxes are in places like Jerry's Foods, for example, right now. And so we'll have a list that we'll send to you of all the locations of those boxes, but would love for you to drop off new items that we can get in the hands of our kids that need it. We also have a community group that's for volunteers that's called our Woodbury Champions group. And this is really about connecting people who have a philanthropic mindset, who want to engage and volunteer in the community. And so we get this group together about every other month. And we have different things. We do service projects. Sometimes we hear from organizations. Our next event is on December 1st, and that's actually at Eagle Valley Golf Course, and we'll have a guest speaker. So a couple new, just interesting ways that your family, and that's also a great opportunity to bring high school kids or college kids, maybe even adult children in the community that you want to, start serving with them together to come to the Champions event. And so we have just some next steps. You're going to get a follow-up email, like we said, that'll have some resources about things that are going on that I mentioned, as well as some resources from our panelists that they might want to share with you. So just keep an eye out for that. And, next steps, again, it's about starting this conversation. We want you to take what you learned tonight and take it a step forward. So start a conversation with your spouse or with family. Maybe talk about your favorite nonprofits. Maybe tonight it's coming up with a family mission of how you want to integrate generosity, in your life, and maybe setting some goals for 2023 around how you're going to be a more generous family in 2023. And then, of course, stay in touch with us. We're here to equip you and connect you to organizations so that you can make a difference. So if there are ways in which the Community Foundation can help facilitate this for you, I know Christy even mentioned things like donor advised funds. I mean, this is something that the foundation does. We have lots of resources to be able to help you be more philanthropic in the community. And so we'd love to connect you and help you learn more.
And I recognize we're coming up on the end of our time together, but I know our panelists would be, I'm speaking for you, happy to stick around for a little bit to answer any questions. So feel free to either raise your hand or throw a question in the Q&A box. We'll love to take those. And if there aren't any questions, of course, we'll say thank you, but we'll give you a minute. Panelists, any final words or final thoughts that you have on this topic? We've said it all. That's awesome. Beth, feel free.
All right, I was just, this can go with the resources that you provide, but we're talking about, generous children, but it can start with the adults. Again, there is a lot of evidence-based research on this. So you could just, there's a lovely Dr. Lori Santos. She did a very popular podcast called The Happiness Lab that you could listen to. Just an adult to kind of help you start thinking about this, and again, top-down approach to your family and your children. And then also there's a really good UC Berkeley has the Greater Good Science Center, And so they have a lot of research behind what they do too. And there's this really long but lovely article. I like, again, research, but The Science of Generosity is a good one to read. So again, I can provide that for resources, but just wanted to add that.
Great, thank you. Maya, Julie, Philip, anything else you'd like to add?
I'll just throw out a quote that's not mine, but Gandhi's: just be the change that you wish to see in the world.
That is a perfect way to end things. Thank you all so much for your time, for your wisdom. Christy, thanks for launching this with the foundation. What a fun conversation. I took notes and will integrate some things into my own life. So thank you very much. Everyone have a great night. Christy, anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you all. Thanks again to Spire for being our sponsor tonight. And we just appreciate your time tonight, all of our panelists. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your evening with us.
Take care, everyone.